In conjunction with the Marita Sturken reading for this week, I wanted to share a range of objects that have come to be associated with 9/11 memory, either ways of memorializing those who perished that day or ways of commemorating the events of 9/11 through anniversaries, museum work, and everyday objects. The first thing, and Sturken talks about this, is the variety of ways in which people were memorialized on and around 9/11, people who died as a result of the attacks, and we saw this spontaneous creation of these street-side altars with flowers, everyday objects, teddy bears, images of the deceased, candles, a variety of different objects that were meant to evoke the person who had died, and these became kind of mass assemblages around New York City. In particular, Union Square Park became a site of mass memorialization, and there were a variety of ways in which people did this, but many people left objects as part of this spontaneous altar creation. And it was very eclectic, this memorialization. Saints were beside Beanie Babies, right? All of this was meant to kind of offer comfort and also to memorialize the deceased through this kind of public offering. The other thing that we see is a range of objects that are created, many of them mass-produced objects of popular culture that were marketed to commemorate 9/11 in the aftermath of the attacks. And this is where we can see a lot of kitsch that Sturken talks about in terms of how 9/11 is marketed and remembered, 9/11 memory. So here we have everything from thimbles to keychains to snow globes, platters, salt and pepper shakers, prints, and even some commemorative objects that you could purchase specifically to remember. And here we have the image of the 9/11 firefighters raising the flag at Ground Zero, and this image gets repeated over and over and over again across these mass-produced objects, as does the image of the Twin Towers. One of my favorites is this commemorative flask, which was sold on Etsy in September of 2011. Here we have things that were sold through the Tribute World Trade Center Visitor Center gift shop after 9/11. This again is in the relatively immediate aftermath of the attacks. Commemorative prints, these are magnets. There's a holiday ornament. And then, of course, after the creation of the 9/11 Museum, the gift shop has a number of different items for sale that you can take away as souvenirs of your experience of 9/11 memorialization. Items honoring first responders, lapel pins, keychains, and also teddy bears and other stuffed animals, and kind of part of the iconography of 9/11 memory. It's also interesting to see what happened on the occasion of the 10-year commemoration in 2011. And there were a number of different artifacts that emerged as symbols during this commemorative time. There was, of course, heavy use of the flag, and in particular a flag that was repaired and toured around the country. There was also this 10th anniversary flag of honor, which had the names of people who were killed during the attacks. One of the things I find most fascinating is the way in which debris recovered from Ground Zero site became a symbol, a memorial symbol of the attacks, and functioned very much as memorial statuary in communities all around the country. So pieces of this debris were shipped around to different communities and installed like public statuary in public squares or in different cities and towns across America. And then these sculptures in turn became a site of commemorative activity every year, particularly in the major anniversaries, but on an annual basis as well. And so we can see these pieces of debris from the Twin Towers as functioning like a memorial statue would. The other thing that's interesting is the way in which people want to touch, want to connect with this debris, and the way in which it almost serves as a kind of memorial structure as well, like a tombstone. The other thing that's fascinating is the way in which particular ironwork that was part of the Twin Towers that survived became this monumental symbol and is actually installed at the 9/11 Museum in New York. And in particular, these two pieces, which resemble crosses and sort of take on the role of spiritual statuary when displayed in the gallery. We also see pieces of debris displayed as almost like a contemporary sculpture would be in the 9/11 Museum. This one's called Impact Steel. And then, of course, with the creation of the 9/11 Museum, there's a whole variety of artifacts that are now part of the collection of this museum, which are utilized to tell the story of 9/11 and embody the experience of that time. One is, of course, a fire truck that was recovered from the site and was literally moved and installed as an artifact in the museum. And there are many objects that are related to the first responders at the site. Here we have a battalion chief with his recovered helmet from the site. Here are objects related to the wreckage and reclamation crew, a hard hat and tools. And then other more interesting and idiosyncratic objects, as well as the door to a New York Fire Department truck. And on the left, we have Rudy Giuliani's cell phone. And I think this is a really interesting case, these 9/11 objects, in which what are otherwise ordinary everyday objects are now become historically significant by virtue of the fact that they have a connection to this particular event. So Rudy Giuliani's cell phone. Here are two pairs of shoes that were worn by people who worked in the Twin Towers. These shoes, you can see in the case of the pumps, there's blood still on the pump that as the woman was escaping the building. And the other pair of shoes contains dust from the wreckage debris. This is a doll that was from a daycare center that was located in the North Tower. It was found by volunteer rescuer Brian Van Flandern, and he came to help out. The doll was actually from a shelf in the Chances for Children charity, which was located, it wasn't a daycare center, it was a charity that was located in the North Tower. This is a flight attendant call button from United Flight 93. Again, a very ordinary object that we see anytime we fly on a plane, but this now has taken on special significance, and we also see that it's damaged from the crash. Another interesting thing I wanted to note with 9/11 memory are Afghan war rugs. Now, Afghan war rugs actually don't exist in the Afghan tradition until the late 1970s or so, and we don't really see them. I mean, rug making is traditional in Afghanistan, but we start to see these war rugs that are related to the Soviet era, the era of Soviet occupation and beyond. So here's one that specifically relates to the occupation of Soviet troops. And here are two examples of rugs that commemorate the exit of the Soviets from Afghanistan. And then we see the proliferation of Afghan rugs that were, again, made in this figurative tradition of the war rug to specifically commemorate 9/11 and its aftermath. So we see here they often have images of the Twin Towers on them, of the planes impact with the Twin Towers. We also have down below a U.S. aircraft carrier on the right. On the left, we see both the September 11 attacks as well as Tora Bora and U.S. fighter jets. Here's another example of two 9/11 themed Afghan war rugs. Again, we see the Twin Towers. There's a kind of visual vocabulary that a lot of these have, with the planes impacting the towers, U.S. military equipment, missiles, and then also the embedding of flags. And finally, two which commemorate the war on terror after 9/11. And both of these portray Tora Bora and the U.S. Occupation of Afghanistan, as well as on the right, the Iraq War. And these are much more specifically military in nature, but they also show, again, this image of a friendship or alliance between the United States and Afghanistan. And I think that's one of the things we want to pay attention to with these rugs. They're often misinterpreted to be representations of Afghani experience of Soviet occupation or U.S. occupation or 9/11, but in fact, the majority of these rugs are actually created by Afghani artists for non-Afghani consumers. They are sold to military personnel, people who work for governmental and non-governmental organizations, people who are in the country for a variety of reasons. They are made by some of the same artisans who make traditional Afghanistan rugs, but they are made explicitly for an external market and are not actually a representation of Afghani experience or sensibilities. And also there's, a lot of the money for these rugs does not actually go back to the artisans themselves, but is often collected by dealers or middlemen, as many Oriental rugs are in general, made in a very exploitive craft industry and then marketed to Westerners and others outside the country of origin.